evening. It is indeed an extraordinary pleasure for me to welcome you here today on behalf of the Silverman College of Business to this year's Richard M. Clark Distinguished Entrepreneurship Lecture. And our presenter today, Mr. Stephen McDonnell. Stephen is the CEO of Applegate Farms, and his is the classic, indeed, the entrepreneurial story. In many ways, as I've told my students, that entrepreneurship is about creating value in the marketplace. And what Stephen has done with Applegate Farms is about discovering that niche that isn't being served and going after that niche with all your heart and soul and sweat and blood and tears, essentially all of your commitment. It is about moving forward no matter what happens. And perhaps even when your building burns to the ground. Right, Stephen? His team at Applegate has been doing that for 25 years. He likes to say they are just working hard, putting one foot in front of the other. And that's a great lesson for all of you budding entrepreneurs. It's not about developing a 5-year strategic plan, but essentially developing a plan, that day-to-day plan, putting that one foot before the other. Of course, hard work has to have a foundation, and there's much more to his success that I'm sure he will share today than that. As it turns out, his is also a very modern entrepreneurial success story. Consider, for instance, the niche that he has found. Now, millions, perhaps tens of millions, maybe even some may say hundreds of millions of us in this country love to eat meat, but still want to eat healthy. Now, close your eyes for a moment and think of this concept about, imagine a healthy bacon. Perhaps hot dogs without nitrites or nitrates. Even gluten-free chicken nuggets. That's right, as he likes to say, Applegate sells healthy meat. So you can eat your cake and have it too. To make all this happen, Stephen created a deep network of farmers, nearly 1,000 so far, and I believe he expects it to be about 10,000 sometime soon. These are sustainable farmers who treat their animals humanely, gently, and respectfully, give them plenty of healthy food and water, and never give them added antibiotics or hormones. And in many ways, this is also similar to something else that we in Silverman College of Business are particularly proud of. You have heard from some significant testimonials from our graduates on the innovation, on the entrepreneurship front. I will also take the moment to plug our other focus, which is on sustainability. In as much as the Rothman Institute of Entrepreneurship is a significant cornerstone for what we do in the college, we also have the Institute of Sustainable Enterprise. And the story that Stephen will share with us today essentially speaks to both of these pillars, innovation and sustainability. Stephen deeply understands the central role of networks and communities and stakeholders in building a good business. He also understands how much good a company can do while making a healthy profit. Applegate, for instance, helped those farmers with which it has developed this network succeed. They, in turn, makes his success possible, and Applegate, by any stretch of your yardstick, is a huge success. It's basically about a $100 million company today. So the ideas that Stephen is going to be sharing today with us couldn't be more timely. But if you think about it, it's also old-fashioned in a very special way and in a very best sense. To borrow a phrase that Stephen has used, he's building a company that will last. And we are indeed excited and privileged to have Stephen here share his story on Applegate Farms with us. Stephen?
That was a fabulous introduction. I think he just ought to keep going. I think he's got it down more than I do. So thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. I was reflecting on the time when I first looked at this introduction to come speak here, and it's really the fact that it's the Richard M. Clark Distinguished Entrepreneur Lecture that got me to say yes, because I see myself as a meat guy. And I'm pretty sure in this whole lecture series, I'm the first meat guy, and I'll probably be the last meat guy. So for one moment tonight, I can be a distinguished meat guy. And that will never happen again. So I really appreciate the honor. And I appreciate the effort Fairleigh Dickinson makes in pursuing these programs around entrepreneurship and innovation. It's obviously what I ended up doing with my career. My innovation, and I've been working on it for 26 years, is Applegate. Applegate's an organic and natural meat company that I started from scratch in 1987. We now sell more than 30 million pounds a year. We're actually closer to about $250 million in sales, and think by 2020 we'll be closer to $1 billion. And that's all sounds like a lot, but the meat we sell now is actually less than 0.25% of all the meat sold in this country. We have about 150 products and range from, as Jim said, bacon, hot dogs, deli meats, nuggets, sausages. 30% of what we sell is organic, and the remaining 70% is antibiotic-free, and I'll explain the difference a little bit later. Our mission, to change the meat we eat. And that's been kind of my mindset for this country, but now as things are beginning to take off, I'm really shifting in my thinking much more globally. And there are two ideas that are behind that. We must change the meat we eat. And the good news is we can. Tonight I'll talk about both of them, but to begin with, I'll talk a little bit about my history and how I ended up getting into this. Meat, needless to say, was not what I thought I was going to do. I graduated from Hampshire College, sailed halfway around the world, had a few jobs in business that I liked but I didn't love. And one day when I was almost 30, my brother-in-law, a guy named Simon Pierce, who's a glassblower up in Vermont, called me to see if I would help him grow his business. I jumped at the opportunity, got into small business from these otherwise large companies, and I never really looked back. While I was good at the earlier jobs, I wasn't great. It's the difference between a class you find interesting and a class that you can't wait for it to begin. In one, you learn a lot. In the other, it defines you. It wasn't long before I realized that I needed to have my own business. Working for your brother-in-law is great, but there are limits. Turns out my brain really kicks in when I'm at risk. When my butt is next to a fire, which happens in small business, as you guys know, every day, I get really smart. Or maybe it's not that I'm that smart, I just work really, really, really hard. So when I found this tiny little smokehouse, actually, I grew up in Peapack, which is not too far from here, and the smokehouse was in Flemington, which is also not that far, and it was making nitrate-free bacon, I thought I hit the jackpot. I grew up in a large Irish Catholic family here in New Jersey with 9 brothers and sisters, and the key to happiness for us was the roast beef on Sunday night. Nothing was better. That was our altar at home. I loved meat growing up. So when I showed up at Hampshire, if you guys know Hampshire near Amherst, Mass, in the early 70s, the place was buried in granola. everyone was a vegetarian. And I did make a concerted effort to become one. I even for a short while was macrobiotic. Seriously, I tried, but it didn't last. I was once described as the worst vegetarian ever. And this business proves that point. As odd as it may seem, Applegate sees itself as pro-vegetarian. I know that sounds a little weird, so let me explain. The meat we eat and what it takes to produce it is something that concerns all of us, even the vegetarians. The reason is that we're the only society in the world that puts meat at the center of the plate. In other cultures, it's a side dish, it's a condiment. But in the US, we eat way too much meat. The average American eats over 200 pounds a year, which is like a quarter pounder every meal, every day. It's unsustainable and is just too freaking much. Even for meat lovers like me, and I'm sure a few meat lovers out there. Factory farming, which is how all of this meat we get, has huge implications for human health, for climate, for the land, and for the economy. So if you're a vegetarian, you might never buy an Applegate product, but you're living on the same planet and we're part of the same problem, same larger system. Improving that system is our mission, because the system isn't working. In fact, it's gone off a cliff. It's producing food that's bad for people and bad for the planet. Interesting side note, it's funny, as I go through this, and I'm 58, my passion around this just gets more and more intense. So as we go on here, the speech isn't that long, I get more emphatic. It's just because the more I talk about it, the more I believe it. To show you what I mean, let's start with cows, specifically cow stomachs. They've got 4 of them for proper digestion. The reason? They eat grass. They eat grass, they need 4 stomachs. You know what they eat. You know they eat corn, and that's one of the key components to cheap meat. But it's not what nature intended. Feed a cow the wrong diet, pen it up with hundreds of other animals in a cramped, filthy space, shoot them up with growth hormones. It doesn't take a veterinary degree to guess what happens. It makes them sick. And that's where the antibiotics come in. And antibiotics is kind of the centerpiece of what Applegate is about. The way the industry raises animal completely destroys your immune system. But by pumping them full of antibiotics, animals can survive on a terrible diet in terrible conditions, and they can grow big enough and live just long enough to get them to the slaughterhouse. That's why 80% of all the antibiotics sold in the US were used on animals and not on humans. Not kids with strep throat or old folks with pneumonia. Animals that were made sick because of the use of antibiotics, because it allowed those unsustainable conditions to exist. That's 33 million cows, 113 million pigs, 250 million turkeys, and 8.5 billion chickens annually. Without antibiotics, you just simply couldn't turn 9 billion animals into cheap meat. But with antibiotics, not only is it possible, it's extremely profitable. That's how you get a 16-ounce package of bacon for $5. The meat is cheap, but it's costing us a fortune. In reality, the price you pay for meat at the grocery store is way out of whack with what it really costs us environmentally in terms of pollution, specifically methane, ethically in the way we treat these animals, economically in terms of health care, and personally too, because we're raising animals for slaughter and it's making us sick. You already know that people die every year from eating beef contaminated with salmonella. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something worse than that. I'm sure you've heard about antibiotic resistance. and the bad news. You have to go into the hard stuff to pop out to the solution set. So I know nobody wants to get freaked out, or that's not my intention here. My intention is to drive to the base of the truth, because it's only from the truth that you can start constructing a sustainable solution set. So antibiotic resistance, the CDC's all over it. It's a big deal. I don't have to convince you that antibiotics are one of the most, if not the most important medical invention in human history. Just imagine if one day they stopped working. If your kid got a strep throat and you couldn't deliver them an antibiotic that works, it would literally put us back into the dark ages. And it's not science fiction. It's happening before our eyes. Part of the reason is that when doctors overprescribe antibiotics, bacteria starts to evolve to resist them. That creates antibiotic-resistant superbugs, like MRSA, an antibiotic-resistant bacteria which already kills more people than AIDS every year in this country. What's happening in humans is happening on a much bigger scale on factory farms. The largest recall of meat in the past few years have been due to antibiotic-resistant bacteria. The Environmental Working Group just published an analysis of what government monitoring has found in store-bought meat. 81% of raw turkey contained antibiotic-resistant bacteria. And more than half of raw chicken samples were not only tainted with E. coli, but with a strain of E. coli that's resistant to antibiotics. Antibiotic-resistant salmonella is also on the rise. That means when you get down to it, you're pretty powerless to fight it. Already, antibiotic resistance is costing our healthcare system between $16 and $26 billion. Animals don't need antibiotics. They are born with immune systems that keep them healthy, just like us. Bad management practices designed to create cheap meat is the source of the problem. Applegate does things differently. We work with a network of more than 1,000 family farms. They use common sense practices like keeping farms clean. It's so basic, it's kind of hard to accept that this part of the solution is this simple. They keep them clean, they give them enough space, they feed them a real diet, and they're not pumping them full of drugs. Instead of relying on antibiotics, we let the animal's immune system to kick in and do what they were already designed to do. All of our animals are raised with no antibiotics, and guess what? Less than 1% get sick. So some people think, well, like, it's cruel not to use any antibiotics. To be clear, when that 1% gets sick, we do treat them. We do believe in using antibiotics when an animal truly does get sick. It just doesn't happen very often, and then they're segregated and taken out of our network. Make no mistake, it costs more, 20 to 30%. But compared to what? We have a saying, cheap food is neither cheap nor food. Our products are a little more expensive, but they're way better tasting. I hope you tried some back there. Way healthier, and they're not putting the future of human civilization at risk. It turns out the solution we've pioneered isn't just a way for Applegate to build a thriving business. It's an opportunity to transform the entire meat industry, which in this country is $100 billion annually, 50 in retail, 50 in food service. It's an opportunity to transform the entire meat industry, to revive family farms in America, to spread humane practices for animals, peace of mind for parents, and to make the world a better, safer, and healthier place. Some people ask where the model can be scaled. In my view, there's no evidence we can't scale antibiotic-free meat, only evidence that we can. Applegate is one piece of that evidence. This is not a niche company anymore. This is not an alternative. Our products are now on the shelves of over 40% of all supermarkets in the country. We've been growing super fast, even through the recession, and across all different categories of consumers. I just found out that our Sunday bacon is selling in South Texas, near the Mexican border, to immigrants who make less than $30,000 a year. And I suspect, I can't prove it, but the reason is they are the agricultural front line. So they are exposed in this country to more levels of pesticides and toxic chemicals because they work in the fields, and so they're becoming aware of the impact on their kids and in their families, and they are committing themselves to changing their diet. They also come from a culture that appreciates great food. As people get more educated about how food is produced, they're shopping differently. They're not just stumbling on us, they're looking for us. And when they find us, they get passionate about the brand. Look at social media. We have more people engaged with us weekly than all other meat brands combined. And this is just the beginning. Right now, the organic segment of the dairy market is about 6%. Organic and natural meat, less than 0.5%. That's the scale of the opportunity we see at Applegate, and the opportunity we see to scale the organic and natural sector. Companies like ours can grow to meet this opportunity because we're altering the economics of who wins and who loses. The power is shifting from the big food companies, and as I like to say, I hope nobody works for a big food company, they're actually chemical companies pretending to be food companies. They don't produce food that's nutritious. And if you look at their gross margin structure, it's all about making that a consumer feel that they're buying food. When it's not food, they make the margin, which gives them the marketing dollars to advertise to your kids on Saturday morning. Without that, they would have nothing. I got to add in a little piece, which is not in here. What makes that work is the addictive triangle of salt, fat, and sugar. And while I hold the food companies responsible, and my PR guys hate it when I say this, I also fully believe that each of us have to take complete responsibility for our health. No hospital, no school, no nothing is going to stop your shift or all of our shifts, and believe me, I love McDonald's Coke. I mean, it's my favorite drink of all time. Nothing is going to make that shift happen unless people individually take responsibility for their own immune system and supporting it. And the only thing that builds immune systems is real food. With our model of meat production, family farmers are big winners too. Applegate started working out with 100 farms, even less. Now we're over 1,000, and Jim, you're right, it'll be over 10,000. That infrastructure is already there. The land is there, the science and the ability and the desire are there. There's a whole network of farms that can be retrofitted to raise animals sustainably, humanely, and in very big numbers. And I'm not talking about little chickens. These are farms where they can, in one house, can have 10,000 chickens in a farm. Not 100,000, but 10,000. And they can have 3 of them on a farm. So any individual farmer, completely economically deriving 100% of their income, families can be educated at home, laundry's on the line. They have 30,000 chickens, at total capacity. They rotate over time. Sustainable, organic, and antibiotic-free meat is going to get bigger through efficiencies, innovations, and especially by developing these networks that allows family farmers to aggregate. We build a network, ensure its in quality and safety, and provide a bridge between family farms and consumers, which gives the farmers a steady income stream, and it gives the largely moms who buy it a connection that they trust. The only way for small farmers to compete with big ag is if they get paid a premium for creating a high-quality product. And when you buy that $5 pound of bacon, you are really gypping the farmers. They are not being paid what they deserve or anything close to a wage that anyone in this room would accept. So a piece of the equation to fix the jobs is you got to make jobs that they can live on. Applegate does that, which gives them a pathway to stay in business. My point here is that that organic and natural meat is going to get bigger by staying small, and it's not going to just get bigger, it's going to get big, period. And the trick in all these companies is how can you scale and not sell out? And actually, I've just figured out today a really important new fix, which if somebody asks me a question about that, I'll explain in the end how I think we can replace those, because we have very, very low gross margins, so we have no marketing dollars. And I just figured out a way to fix that without cheapening the product, which is what most people do, or just changing the pack size. Right now, the industry is in serious denial, completely serious. I mean, you cannot believe how deep their heads are in the sand. And they know it's a problem. They just have zero courage to accept it and make the change, because all they say is just shareholder value. And those shareholders are pension funds, which are you're in. So their argument is they're working for you by giving you meat that's not healthy. It's like, what am I missing here? All they know is cheap and more, but America is moving towards less and better. Obviously, anyone remotely interested in sustainability understands that has to be the economic shift, to make less and better as profitable as more is cheaper. As consumer behaviors change and continue to change, laws will start to change. Transparency requirements will start to change. Innovation and competition is going to kick in. It already is. After all, money talks in Washington, and the people who have it, they get what they want. Like the powerful ag lobby. You know the food pyramid? I love this. It tells you what you can eat and what you can't eat, what's good, eat a lot of this, eat a little of that. The funding pyramid for food, ag in this country is the inversion of that pyramid for us. In other words, we fund the things we're not supposed to eat, like sugar. The right dollars are going to the wrong place. And don't think for a minute that your vote, as defined by what you buy, doesn't matter. It does every day. If everyone boycotted a particular product and used social media effectively, and wait till you see the tools that these kids are going to produce to make that possible. I also have another really good idea about that for anybody who wants to get a good idea for a business. You would quickly see the stock price of those companies drop, and those dollars would begin to shift. Will organic and natural ever be 80% of the market? I have no idea. Side note, the one thing they say is, well, how are you going to feed a planet with 9.5 billion people? That's the only thing they say. I said, I don't know how far this model can go, but I can tell you that yours is completely broken and gone off a cliff, so don't tell me my model can't do it and your model can. I don't know. I do know that if we get to 20%, which is going to happen, it's happening right now, it's really exciting what's happening in retail now, we've already then have made a huge and permanent impact on industry. What I'm interested in doing now, and it's funny that it's gotten this big, is I want to get with Horizon, I need to get with Stonyfield, I need to get with Annie's, all these other natural food brands some of you may know. If the collection of us can get to 1 billion, then industry, which is really struggling because their model doesn't work anymore, is going to see us as an alternative. I think they're interested in us because we're growing and they're not, so they're kind of, oh, wow, let's invest in that. But I don't think they're true believers. Once you can scale to 1 billion, and instead of being a $30 billion industry, it gets over a $100 billion industry or $200 billion, then there's material impact. I think that can happen at about 20% of the market, and we could be bigger. At that point, we'll make an impact on industry, human health, animal welfare, and on the environment, and on whether living on this planet is going to really suck or whether our grandkids are going to be totally amazed. Applegate is privileged to be part of this transformation, and in closing, I'd like to encourage you to be part of that transformation as well. Business is not bad if it has a higher purpose. Money for money, after basics are covered, does not get you happiness. Pursue a mission And if you do well in the process, all the better. You can send all your excess cash back to Fairleigh Dickinson. My advice is for you to aim for something higher, to pursue your own truth. If you see it, go after it. And if it takes you in the opposite direction of everybody else in this room, so much the better. In 1987, I promise you, meat was not hot. And if the truth gets away, chase it down. BS exists in abundance in the business world. Truths are rare nuggets. Don't relent. Doing well by doing good is a cliche, but I'm telling you, it's possible. And so is doing good by eating well. Find a mission, create some positive change. That's what you're being trained to do here, and I wish you all the success in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And that was really very informative and inspiring, and I think personal for all of us to some degree. I know I would have probably ignored what you just said 10 years ago, but when you have a 2-year-old who's resistant to antibiotics, it touches. You understand it. So I get it personally. And I think the faster we can change, the better. So I'll start off with the question, but just wait for the mic for the rest of the questions. So your biggest challenge over the past 26 years, what was that?
Not pissing my wife off. And I can't believe
Cheers.
it. I say to everybody, I was like, forget the fact I've been successful. I'm still married.
As the channels of distribution of your product, I assume you sell through retail stores. You don't sell direct to customers, right?
No, we sell through to retail chains.
So the timing was right because you have things like Whole Foods and other similar retailers that could be channels for you. Are you, for example, in Whole Foods? And then I have another question.
Yeah, Whole Foods has always been our biggest customer, and about 30%. And we, everybody who has a business like mine wants to take their biggest customer or their biggest supplier and reduce them because you don't want a high concentration. But they literally just keep growing. Mm-hmm. I mean, so they're growing, but we're also in Kroger, Safeway, Walmart, everywhere else.
So you weren't the only prophet in the wilderness because other people were interested in the kinds of products that Whole Foods was selling. So your timing was good that you actually had distribution available. Which didn't exist 10 years before that, right?
Right. No, very lucky. I mean, I look around at any entrepreneur, and if they take credit for their success more than 20 or 30%, they are total bullshitters.
Okay. Now,
if you don't catch a wave and get lucky, at least in my experience, it's just, and as a further note, this trend is a retail trend. Most food trends start in food service and cross over to retail. This is a retail trend that is still, to this day, largely owned and controlled by moms. And we are just a bridge for them to the farmers.
Right. How practical, I mean, I don't like the fact that monarch butterflies are dying off because we have corn that doesn't give pollen because it's been drugged up or genetically modified to be its own insecticide. But I like cheap corn. I also don't like crazies who run around and say there should be no modification of products because I'm sure that we've been modifying products since the first corn was found in Central America, and it was about 1.5 inches long.
Right.
So we know how to do it. Practically, I like free-range chicken. My wife pays extra money for it at the market. Is there enough property that's appropriate for raising chickens and raising beef and lamb and all the rest of it, that you could go get rid of the feed lots and those short torture chambers that we see in the Chicago yards?
I mean, this country is based on farming. I mean, that's where we come from. Big Ag has put out I don't know what the statistic is, put out hundreds of thousands, and this is since the 70s, of individual family farms. They're all there and they all want to farm. It's the commitment to, if you know, and this is the other thing people, my guys don't like me to say, to pay more and not have it take more out of your pocketbook, there's two behaviors that have to happen. You need to eat less meat, but we're eating way too much. Make it a condiment. Don't have it on the center of the plate. So be a vegetarian for a while and actually learn how to eat properly. And then my thing is, life's too short not to have bacon on Sunday morning. So moderation in everything, and then we've got to stop putting all these dollars towards junk food, which is actually making people sick. So once that consciousness kicks in, and I'm sure it's kicked in for everybody, you know, it happens whether you have, you know, if you have a heart attack, it happens. If you have breast cancer, it happens. Or if your kid has some kind of a dietary restriction or levels of autism. I mean, the awareness is growing now from lots of different areas. Once that starts kicking in, and demand goes up, and we have to fix the utilization. I mean, part of the problem is this country only likes sirloin, or they only like breast meat, and they only like, you know, certain parts of the animal. We have to, like other countries, learn how to eat the entire animal, because then you're spreading the cost, the premium cost, much more evenly. The reason it's high now is because there's too much demand just for bacon, but not pork shoulders or pork butts, the other things, which are better tasting than bacon. So there's a bunch of stuff that has to happen. But is it there? Yes, it's there. And then we get our we also, for us, local is what's local to the animal, not what's local to you. So we like beef raised in Uruguay, where that's all they do. That's 80% of their exports. And it's a temperate climate, so they don't have to suffer through a huge winter where they have to go inside. They can stay out and graze all year long. So if you can support the animals where they're intended, where nature is kind of a perfect match for them, there's plenty of people that would be happy to be home working on a farm, but making a decent living, not working under the conditions they are now. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Thank you so much. You are an inspiration. You are a pioneer in commitment to sustainability and to getting people to live healthily. And I really want to commend you for that. I think that
Thank you.
We need more people like you, and I think that you're inspiring people to be like you and follow in your footsteps. So I want to thank you for that. My mother actually grew up on a farm in Chatham, and one of their side businesses was to have a chicken farm, and it might have been one of the first organic local chicken farms. It was tiny, but she has great stories to tell me how the chickens roamed around during the day and ate really healthy grains, and I know a lot about eggs that probably not many people do, and what a good egg is supposed to look like. Here's my question to you. I have two questions, actually. Have you thought about going into the baby food business? Has that ever occurred to you? It just occurred to me, and hearing you speak about the healthy types of meats and poultry, et cetera, and I think that there's probably a need for baby food that is organic and prepared in the way that you think is healthy. And the second question I have for you is, do you have a foundation, and do you give to New Jersey nonprofits? So
the first answer is no. In the early years, I've tried a bunch of other businesses, and I failed at every one except Applegate. So the challenge what we have in meat is so huge, it's easy to stay focused right in what we're doing. I would consider an acquisition. There are now alternative non-animal protein-based companies that are producing meat that taste like meat but aren't meat, and I would invest and believe that under our brand we could have alternatives like that. But no, we're going to stay. We're going to stick to our knitting, and so we won't do that. But Happy Baby is if you don't know it, is a great brand to support. And we do have a foundation. And my wife and I are just figuring out now what our focus is, but obviously part of that is going to be sustainable, and part of that is going to be local. And we've already been doing different things, but not in as a big concentrated way as we will in the future. So you can contact me and I can get you to the right source.
So I enjoyed your talk. I also have a daughter who is antibiotic resistant, and I never put that together, that it could be the meat that we're eating. And so that's just a comment, and I appreciated hearing about that. My question is, during the talk, I think you said that 30% of your sales were organic,
Right.
and 70% were natural. So my concern is, and also being in the food business, is that there is no formal definition or standard to natural.
Right.
And it's a marketing term, and I'm battling it often with what is all natural and what is not. And
Yeah.
I think it's a real problem because all of these chemical companies that call themselves food companies put stuff out that they claim is all natural all the time, but there's just no way as a consumer that we can define that.
Yeah. Well, first off, I'm sorry to hear about your daughter. If people in this room heard your daughter's story of what it's like to go to a hospital and know that there's not an antibiotic that may cure her, it's absolutely devastating and shocking. And I can't, I don't like freak people out, but there is a real consequence to what's going on here, and you obviously understand it. Natural is a useless word. I mean, for the USDA, which is what we operate under, they legislated that word to mean nothing. And it was a really effective marketing term because confusing consumers and then calling them too ignorant to understand a label that has some transparency has been their default switch. That's changing now as consumers are actually gaining control over these issues. And we have lost the issue on GMOs. We have to accept that, but we have not lost the right that consumers should demand and must have, which is transparency and labeling. So for us, when we say we're not organic and it's natural we have our own definition, which is no antibiotics ever. So we take that word because that's what consumers gravitate to, good or bad, and then we have to redefine it in a sea of confusion. So I agree with you, we've got to do a better job, but again, that's those lobbying that goes on behind closed doors in Washington. Those are very powerful forces that have a ton of money. When we were fighting Prop 37, which is the GMO labeling issue in California, we had $4 million. A couple of Monsanto, DuPont, a couple of other ones put up $50 million. I mean, now, the advertising didn't work in the last election, but it still worked on this issue. And they created a lot of confusion, and all that momentum that we had was completely lost when those dollars were spent. So there's a lot of fixes that need to happen. But consumer activism, which is when you see every purchase, you buy junk food, you support junky companies. You buy real food, you support real farmers. And when we convert those grocery dollars in our head to votes, watch how fast it's going to shift. And my great idea for anybody who's doing tech stuff is, and we did this in a meat hackathon where you do these high-pressured innovation sessions. You start Friday night and you present actual technology solution sets on Sunday evening. Was we could all in this group, let's say we all lived in the same neighborhood, and we all agreed to take our iPhones and use Scanner Pro and take a picture of your receipt, your shopping receipt. And we all hit a button, we upload it into the cloud, easy to do, and it sorts and aggregates. So we know what everybody's buying, where they're buying it, and how much they're paying. And then we aggregate that. And we find, oh my God, we're all buying like orange juice at 12 different places at 12 different prices. Let's tell this one store that we all agree to that we'll buy your orange juice at this price. So in 1 second, you take that register where all the control, all that data control is held by the supermarkets, and you just turn it upside down. And if you don't think that's going to happen in the next 10 years, you're not living on this planet. Consumers are going to take complete control and start dictating in a community-based way to get healthier food at better prices. And somebody should do that. Hi.
Hi. I read a column for greenbiz.com called Questioning Assumptions. And I've been waiting for a number of years for a food company to stand out and resemble Ray Anderson of Interface in the non-food area. And he was a giant who addressed us here a couple of years ago and died recently. I've been very pleasantly surprised that I've come across about 6 to 8 of you, medium-sized companies. You've mentioned some of them. There's some others. Mark Bittman, the Times columnist, mentioned a bunch of other ones in a recent article. Fast food of all places. Why don't the 6 to 8 of you, and maybe there's even more, who are showing that it is possible, link up with the local food movement? You won't agree on everything, but they have done so much in so few amount of years. I'm amazed. I wouldn't have expected it. Bring the two groups together, and I think you could really accelerate things. So 2 ideas for you.
Yeah, no, and we totally, I totally agree with you that the impact and scale of the local movement has just been stunning and has done an enormous amount to help us. And what I usually try to offer to them is you need a brand. You need a brand so you can scale and aggregate. So what we do is we'll find a slaughterhouse, and then we use a network of 20 or 30 farms, and we synchronize their genetics, because you as shoppers like the same bacon every week, or the same, if you get used to something, you don't like inconsistencies. So we have to sequence those, and then we pull off farms so if we sell 700,000 pounds a week, we need a consistent supply every single week. So we use local networks, and we support local networks. They're just aggregating through a slaughterhouse, and goes under a brand. And otherwise, the local movement is forever stuck, because it's just what happens to be down your street. But in the case of meat, that really often doesn't make sense, because maybe you live in an area where meat shouldn't be raised, or environmentally it doesn't make sense. So we have to work together to support bringing real food, and it's all one component piece. For us, it's making sure the animals are taken care of, and it's also making sure the moms aren't forced to overpay, and it's to making sure the farmers have a right to a fair wage. So it's we do need each other.
Hi, Steve. I love all your answers, and a couple of people have asked questions that I would have asked, but when you said GMO, that battle is over, I was a little disheartened. I know that we lost in California. What do you think that we can do?
We're not done with labeling, but the vast majority of the corn and soy, and now we're talking about salmon, we did wheat, is genetically modified. It's Monsanto won that one. And, I go bigger. I say organic, most people in this country think organic is just an elitist term for rich people who can shop at Whole Foods. And climate change wasn't even in the general election, wasn't even an issue. I mean, we have to accept those. We have to accept those realities. I mean, our positioning is usually late and wrong. And I'm just saying we're not going to un-GMO this country. We first have to at least get labeling. So I'm not giving up on labeling, but I'm not going to think we're going to be, this genetic modification is going to stop. I mean, it's getting worse, not better. And we got to work around that. Hi.
Steve, I have a question about social entrepreneurship. Plenty of people here are interested in entrepreneurship, and some are interested in what I would consider social entrepreneurship, like Applegate, which is doing good for the public welfare as well as being a successful business. What do you see to be the difference between heading in a career in one direction or the other? And what does it take for people like these here in the audience to consider social entrepreneurship?
I don't know, the first thing that comes to mind, I always get nervous when I getting asked good questions like that. Like a moral conscience? It literally, as I get older and I look at people that just have jobs for money, you know, and I got my bankers here, so I got to be careful. And I don't, you know, and they're not, I mean, the guys from Bank of America are supporting our growth, so it's not all investment banking is bad, but there is a very high degree of the primary mission of objective is to collect as much cash as possible and be as rich, which is endless, as can be. But the good news is I think that generation of thinking has got us into trouble, and I think we're moderating back. So a lot of kids today don't want to make a difference and want to be personally engaged, and it means, you know, it's kind of what I said at the end. The trick is you got to find your truth. And that's hard, right? I mean, we have all these notions about what we think we're going to do. So I think, honestly, I would teach a course in self-awareness because I think the truth exists in everybody, but it gets, the education process too also obscures it. And if a kid gets to the truth and they get reinforced for that, then it's kind of hard to go the other way. I mean, some people say, oh, you're an entrepreneur, you have to be an entrepreneur. It's like I backed into it like walking backwards off a diving board. It's a scary, lonely, weird process. You do it, and I think, and I didn't see it all coming. I think I made the right decisions at the right time. And what I always had in my mind was my mother, because she was the mother, and I knew how she thought. I know how she raised me. I knew what she would say yes to and what she would say no to. And the problems, factory farms brought a lot of efficiencies and intelligence and good stuff. I mean, I'm not talking about throwing it all out. I'm just saying they went too far. And it's just knowing what's too far, or the debt lending that, you know, Countrywide was involved in. It was ridiculous. And if there was a moral conscience there, that never would have happened. And the fault lies everywhere. I'm not just blaming big business. They're run by human beings. So anyway, moral conscience.
All right. Thank you so much, Stephen. That was great.